Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives has passed a controversial bill that would impose strict limits on transgender athletes competing in girls' and women's sports. The legislation is expected to next be taken up by the GOP-controlled Senate. The House vote was 218 to 206, with 2 Democrats voting in favor and 1 Democrat voting present. The legislation would ban transgender students from female teams at any school or university that receives federal funding. However, the bill's adoption by the Senate and passage into law is unlikely. To discuss this, we have Ajay Jain Bhutoria, Deputy National Finance Chair. He is, of course, going to talk to us about the Democratic Party's view. We have Matt Klink, Republican strategist, and we also have Professor Andrew Latham, author and professor of political science at the Macalester College, York University in US. And I'll start our discussion with Mr. Bhutoria. You know, there is a fire happening in Los Angeles. There are issues of economy, national security. Banning transgender girls from girls' sport, was that a priority?
Definitely. I mean, there are a lot of more important priorities right now, and this is not one of the highest priority to take it. But as a Democrat, personally, I support the GOP-led bill because it ensures fairness and preserves the integrity of women's sports while respecting the rights of all individuals. Title X was created to guarantee equal opportunities for women and girls, and this legislation would uphold its intent by addressing biological differences that can impact competitive equity. At the same time, we should explore inclusive solutions for an open or mixed divisions to allow participation and opportunity for transgender athletes, so that a balanced and fairness and fostering respect for all members of our community. But at the same time, as I said earlier, this is not the right time for priority. There are so many things which are important, which are going on, and this bill will have no future in the Senate, and it went through the Congress and through a very small margin, I mean.
Mr. Klink, what do you think? Will it have a future in the Senate or not? And if at all, how early is this expected to come into force?
Well, again, that depends on what the enabling legislation says. But let me start by saying this should not be controversial. Biological men should not be competing in biological women's sports. They have distinct genetic advantages. And we have numerous examples of where men have competed against women and they have dominated and hurt women. And a high school girl should not be forced to share a locker room with a biological man. So look, if the 206 Democrats in the House and a number of Democrats in the Senate choose to fall on their sword for this extremist policy, it's only going to play to the Republican Party's advantage, who seem reasonable. Let's not forget, this was a huge issue in the November 2024 election. Donald Trump spent, $225 million with an ad that said, Donald Trump, he's for us, Kamala Harris is for they, them. This just goes to that wokeness that, frankly, the American people resoundingly rejected. As for the future in the Senate, as you know, we need 60 votes for anything to move in the Senate to break a filibuster. But I'm telling you that the times they are a-changing. We've seen the Laken-Riley Act that passed the House that would allow for the deportation of criminal aliens that have committed crimes and murders. It passed in the House, and it looks apparently as that it's going to pass in the Senate. So the Democrats that are on the ballot in 2026, they can read the tea leaves. They know that this, extremist position that actually hurts women is not going to play well for them with mainstream America. And if they're smart, they'll pass this bill. The Democrats say, oh, it only affects a small number of people. Well, it shouldn't be a problem then. Let's cater to the overwhelming majority of women athletes at both the high school and the collegiate levels that work their tail off, and they shouldn't have their accolades stolen by a biological man.
Mr. Latham, would you say this is a latest move in the culture war that is going on in the United States of America?
Well, as a Canadian immigrant to this country, because it all seems kind of weird to me sometimes, but yes, we are in a weird cultural war moment. And I have to say that I'm on the side of the traditional conservatives when it comes down to this. But I think we really, when I look at the United States right now, and I look at this country, as I said, from an immigrant, actually two-time immigrant, born in England, moved to Canada, and then moved here. I'm looking at this moment as one of total weirdness, but not just weirdness, but I'm looking at it as a moment of conservative, traditional conservative, MAGA conservative, liberal progressive weirdness. And I've got two young kids, and it scares me a little bit.
Professor, let me ask you a quick question, though. What's weird about women playing women's sports and men's playing women's sports? I mean, the Democrats can't even identify what a biological female is. That's not weird. You know what? That's just common sense.
I'm agreeing with you. When I look at the world, there's XY chromosomes and XX chromosomes, right? And that every human being, to their very core, has these genetic markers. Now, there's a tiny few people for whom those things don't uptake quite properly, but I'm agreeing with you. I mean, to me, it's 2 + 2 = 4.
Mr. Klink, let me get back to you. And, while we all agree that girls should play girls' sport, and we had an example in the Paris Olympic Games where Imen Khalif from Algeria copped up the allegation of being a man while she was boxing against Angela Carini in the 66 kilogram, where she won the gold medal. But and the fact that schools and colleges in America contribute to the Olympic pool of athletes. However, what are the mechanisms to see that these little girls who will now be tested for being or not being a transgender do not fall prey to predators?
I think what the legislation says, with all due respect, is that you compete under the gender that's on your birth certificate. So I think it's fairly straightforward. Again, this is the fear-mongering spread by the radical left that there's going to be this massive hunt. I mean, if you're born a male, you compete with the males. If you're born a female, you compete with the females. It's pretty simple and straightforward. And again, this is just part of the radical left agenda in this country that wants to, when again, it's the they them mindset. It's people who get caught up in, special rights for special people, and just keep it simple. I mean, look, we have some fantastic female athletes in this country. The example, that I'll give you is Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas, when he was a man and competed against men, was an average athlete. When he competed against the women, he was top of the ticket. So again, there are inherent biological advantages that inure to male athletes. And because they can't make it competing against biological men, they suddenly decide to switch, and then they're top of the line when they compete against women. That's not fair to women. That's why we have are embodying agencies that approve these athletes. And ironically enough, you had the head of the National Collegiate Athletic Association saying that they had no choice but to allow female athletes because they lacked guidance from the federal government. Well, guess what? Congress is trying to give them that guidance. And now the Democrats have switched their argument to say, we don't need to inject ourselves here. Again, the radicals in the Democratic Party are trying to set an agenda that the overwhelming majority of the American people reject. So I would love for them to continue down this path. It will make 2026 a really good election for Republicans.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the broadcast to debate that very important topic that has come to fore today.